So, this is part B of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo editions on just about Saturday, 14th of January 2023. The part A was a frustrated one because of an appointment at the Stratford address, which is supposed to be at 1700 hours GMT. More about that later or in later editions. There is a saying in the Arabic language, Waqt zarurat, not Waqt zarurat, al intizar. Al intizaru ashad min al maut. Now let's check what that actually means in the entry. Al intizar ashaddu min al maut. Meaning of al intizaru ashaddu min al maut in English now. Is from Al Baqarah, Surah Al Baqarah. And it says, and kill them wherever. Where is the intizar al ashad min al maut? So this is anyway the expression al intizar ashad min al maut is used in the general conversation in discourses in Islam to emphasize the importance of keeping word and not keeping people waiting. My experience on Saturday, 14th of January 2023, at an address in Stratford in Newham for a meeting with someone at 1700 hours GMT, very much reminded me of the accuracy and acuteness of the need to have keep the word and keep people not waiting. Every single person, I waited for 32 minutes from 1700 to 1732 hours. And every single person who entered the arena, the venue where the meeting was supposed to take place and where I was waiting for the meeting to start at 1700 hours, every single person who entered the place, every single individual who entered the place did so by using an entrance that I didn't see at first. It was beyond my sight. So every time there was a shadow appearing, I thought it was the person that was supposed to meet me. Now, this went on for 32 minutes, and in the 32 minutes at a public venue, there must have been at least 100 persons coming in and going out. Now, every single person that came in appeared, the vision appeared to me to be the person that was supposed to be meeting me. So every single person that appeared to be the person that was supposed to be meeting me and turned out not to be the person who was supposed to be meeting me, the experience, the feeling, the expectation of the meeting starting and the person appearing lasted for the 32 minutes actually, or even longer. And multiply 32 by 32, and you can have a feeling of how, an idea about how many minutes I went through that experience of the saying, waiting is worse than death. That reminded me of one other occasion that came in my mind. That was, I think, in the late 1980s. It couldn't have been in the 90s, it was late 1980s. Now, late 1980s was a period when there was the telecommunications obviously were in the previous mode, landline, and there was no mobile telephone system, not at least to my access anyway. And somebody kept me waiting outside the Lambeth Town Hall. There was a bus stop in Lambeth Town Hall, I think Haque Lane in Lambeth in Brixton. And the assumption was, the promise was, that the person would appear in a matter of few minutes. But the person didn't appear in a matter of few minutes. And anyone who has experienced waiting in the public kind of arena, public space at a bus stop in London would know that it can be terrible. The feeling can be terrible, especially if the time is indeterminate. So I felt like I was waiting. I was kept waiting there for about an hour. It could have been 60 minutes, it could have been 50 minutes, but it could not have been less than that. And in that time, I went through absolute hell. Nobody, I have never in my whole life, as I remember so far, I never have kept anyone waiting. And if I have kept anyone waiting, I have done that most inadvertently. And I've done that not for more than 2 minutes, 3 minutes. My record is that I always am ahead of the time. That is to say, that if I give the time, like Saturday, 14th of January 2023, I gave the time as 1700 hours. I arrived at the location at 10 minutes to 1700 hours, at least 10 minutes. That is the average time ahead, advance time that I appear at any event that I am supposed to meet somebody, whoever they are, whatever their location, whatever their status, in their minds or in objectively tested, assessed, measured view of the society and their location and the context of society, I make no discrimination. I always am ahead of the time. So today, that was Saturday, the 14th of January 2023. I was there and I remember the event in the late 1980s in Ecker Lane in Lambeth, in Brixton. And the person who kept me waiting was in contact with me for several years. And that time was about the end of those years. So that person must have known that keeping me waiting constituted one of the worst violations of my rights. But having a review of the behavior of this person over the 8 years or so that the contracts continued or lasted, it became clear later that the person was not treating me with objectively definable respect, let alone the respect that that same individual would give to a white person like Edward Garnier, a former conservative MP, but who was hired by that individual in relation to a libel action against the London Evening Standard. Now, Edward Garnier, in the action, I think was paid more than £20,000 or about £20,000 by the same individual. And the main work was done by me. The whole idea about the libel action against the Evening Standard was my idea. And it was anyone who knows about libel action, about legal research and legal strategy would know that it is a very demanding, intellectually very demanding task. Now, having looked at this individual retrospectively, it became clear to me, it has become clear to me and clearer to me, that the individual actually lacked the basic, essential, ethical, moral, strategic knowledge. Now, without my advice, without my work, that person would never have launched that libel action, let alone won it, because the Evening Standard lost it. Whatever stage it went through in the court, I didn't go to the court. Whatever the procedure, Edward Garnier actually reached on behalf of this individual was, objectively speaking, a successful one. And if the work that I put in, the time that I put in, the time is the time, essential, central factor. If I took the time into account, then £20,000 paid to around £20,000 paid to Edward Garnier. Well, it could be 20,000, it could have been 30,000, but whatever it was more than £15,000 paid to Edward Garnier. And Garnier didn't do the research. Most licensed law traders cannot do the research, are not known to have done the research themselves. And I have known so many licensed law traders even before I was offered the place, the call to the bar in 1973 by Lincoln's Inn, and since 1973. Licensed law traders, solicitors, barristers, QCs, silks, Queen's Counsel now, paralegals. Nobody, to my knowledge, has been able to do the kind of work that I have done and I can do and I have been doing. So if the quality and the outcome of my work is measured, and the rate charged by David Pennick, charged who charged the Manchester City Football Club, not the Manchester United, in his retention as the hired licensed law trader in relation to the Manchester City Football Club's particular legal action in relation to the fine, regulatory, disciplinary action, fine and action that had been taken against it by a European football regulator, then I would have been entitled at David Pennick's rate to say that I was owed several million pounds by that individual on that matter of the legal action against the Evening Standard. This is what I mean by referring to the saint, my great grandfather, the Badshah. The Badshah didn't do any legal work as such, he did the spiritual work, healing people. But his spiritual work of healing people amounted to much more reward and benefits than any legal work could represent for any of the people that I have been helping. Now, this individual who kept me waiting at the Eka Lane bus stop obviously must have thought that I was not as important as was Garnier. Because if they thought that I was as important, anywhere remotely as important as Edward Garnier, they would not only have kept me waiting, but they would offer apologies beyond description. The same individual, the same individual on one occasion, towards the end of the contact, said that I was not that important. What is the meaning of that important? That important meaning what? Affecting what? A life, reputation, career, name, fame? Well, the association with me, the contact with me for 8 years by that individual guaranteed, guaranteed their name, their personality being salvaged. If the evidence of this individual crying, weeping endlessly, uncontrollably, weeping is anything to go by, then at the point where they sought my help in February 1984, the point at which my intervention and my help was sought and obtained by this individual, they would have been they would have been doing some serious piece of self-harm. They didn't do that because the electrifying speed with which I did the work and salvaged them not only restored them to the equilibrium where they would have been before they experienced the shattering event that caused them to come to me. They would have been completely done for. They would have been gone. Of course, it is a possibility that this individual had a record of using weeping, profuse weeping and crying as an emotional weapon to influence other people's sympathy towards them. It could be. But I never had any knowledge about this individual until February 1984 when they came to me. And they came to me at an event where they wept. They wept profusely. They wept for about, I would say, they wept for about half an hour, if not longer. And they wept at an address in the Hanbury Street off Brick Lane at the Montefiore Center. At a regular meeting of what was then called the CCTH or Tower Hamlets Community Citizens Citizens CCTH, Council of Citizens of Tower Hamlets, whatever the name was, because that organization, which I joined exactly exactly 50 calendar years ago as a volunteer supporter, of which I am the honorary, that is unpaid, chief executive now, and I have been for the last 10 years. That organization was holding a regular meeting, monthly meeting, whatever, periodical meeting at the Montefiore Center. And we were going through the agenda, the ordinary agenda, whatever the agenda was at the time. It was an evening meeting. And there was this announcement by somebody who was running the agenda of the meeting or running order, announced that there was a guest at the present at the meeting. Until that announcement, I had no idea who the guest was or whether there was a guest or not, because I was sitting at the other extreme of the hall. It was quite a big room, could be a hall. And this person then began talking about their experience at a post office. This individual went to collect, remember that was 1984. So they went to a post office in Tower Hamlets, the post office somewhere in the Badet Road area, to collect their child benefit. The individual was an employed person at the time, but they had a child benefit entitlement which they went to the post office to cash. Now, the postmaster, who was described as an Indian, not as a Bangladeshi or a Pakistani, but as an Indian, suspected the individual and alleged that this individual was a thief, that this child benefit book did not belong to them. And the individual was reported to the police, and the police came and arrested the individual and took them to the Limehouse police station in E14. That was in the vicinity, in the area of their work, their normal work, not anything to do with the child benefit, but they, and the individual lived in at an address in Lambeth. It's a street called Wyatt Park, WYATT, I think, Wyatt Park. Let's see what the actual work address was. So that was a street. Was it Wire Park Road? This is listed as Wire Park Road now. It was in the Streatham area in Lambeth. So that was not anywhere near the post office. That was their home address, which was in Lambeth, and the post office was in Tower Hamlets. And the individual was arrested and taken into custody at the Limehouse police station. Now, this happened a few days before the individual sought the help of the, let's say, the Tower Hamlets citizens of Council of Citizens of Tower Hamlets, which is and has been what is called a race relations organization in the borough. Now, the people who were present at the meeting where this individual came and wept for help over a period of about half an hour, lasting half an hour. There are people from all kinds of backgrounds, but nobody made any comment that I can remember except a formal kind of mention of the fact that the individual is seeking the help of the Council of Citizens of Tower Hamlets. And the reason why they were seeking the help of the Council of Citizens of Tower Hamlets was not made obvious in the conversation that the individual had or the statement that they had. Because somebody must have suggested to them that this was the organization that could help them. They didn't go to somebody like Edward Garnier or a lawyer, licensed law trader. That was February 1984. They didn't go to a lawyer as far as we could tell. They came instead to a voluntary organization. Now, if they checked, or if anyone checks the actual record and the evidence of the work of this organization over the last 50 years that I have been associated with it, they would know that if anyone associated with that organization did anything to implement any program of advocacy, articulation, and championing and campaigning against racial discrimination, there was only one individual, has been only one individual, that is me. But this individual never made any mention of me or any individual in their presentation of their very emotional plea for help. And the feeling that this individual expressed was one of complete trauma. That is the feeling they expressed. Whether they were actually traumatized is another matter, but that is how they came across. Was it important enough to give them the help? And how many similar situations had they faced or did they face eventually during the 8 years of contact with me that would justify their seeking my help and getting it from me and represented in that contact my being too important? I mean, at what point did they decide that I was not that important? This is a question that deserves to be examined by going through item by item all 8 years of the work that this individual sought from me and received from me. In a piece, in a piece, in a piece that is completely, absolutely unethical and untruthful, private law, I said that this individual paid me significant amount of money. This is something that is an absolute, permanent, perennial lie. This individual could not pay me anything, would not pay me anything. The only thing that this individual contributed was towards part of the cost of certain things, which I shall examine in due course, not necessarily in this edition, but in due course. So, going back to the keeping me waiting for an hour at the Haque Lane near the Lumber Town Hall, this was grotesque. This was grotesque act of insult that they would not dream of inflicting, either on Edward Garnier or another white licensed law trader they appeared to be in contact with for some time, or at least for a period. A man used to be called Tony Gifford. Now, the behavior of the police in arresting this individual at the allegation of the postmaster in the Burdett Road area was treated, and this individual came to a race relations body, meaning that the police had racially targeted and victimized them. Now, contrast that with this individual's servile attitude towards Tony Gifford. Tony Gifford is one of the races that actually has a post-colonial colonial relationship with some people in the Caribbean area. Very much of the same or similar description to Jeffrey Robertson, the Australian racist. And this individual, keeping me waiting there for an hour without any contact and without any explanation, without any apology, took me literally for granted. Taking into account all the other descriptions of this individual and their expressions of ingratitude, it is clear that this individual treated me, because of my background, that is ethnicity, race, faith, whatever, as belonging to a level far lower than any white person that they had known or any person of other ethnicity that they had known. Now, was that because they thought that I was not that important? What would be that important at that stage? For example, instead of going to a professional career, business career lawyer, they came to me for a almost day-long hearing, a disciplinary hearing that they were the defendant at. Disciplinary hearing conducted by the Inner London Education Authority. And the person that chaired that hearing was a woman called Lorna Borland, who later extended her kind of surname as Lorna Borland Kelly after she married a person with the surname Kelly. Why did that person request me to appear with them? What was the reason? Because I was not in practice with a shop as a licensed law trader. I was not in practice as a licensed anything. So why did they ask me to go there and spend the whole hearing with them? The outcome of that hearing, of course, was that they were successful in not being disciplined by the Inner London Education Authority. To what extent could that be ascribed to my being present there? Similarly, that individual associated themselves with me, and that association was public. To the extent that that individual volunteered the information to me. I didn't know about that information. That people they knew, or people who knew them, had said that this individual was having a personal sexual relationship with me. I never made any such statement to any individual. Now, the reason why that individual made that information to me available was in the context of all the contracts and exchanges to ingratiate themselves to me, because that information was not something that I had made available publicly or would have made available publicly. I had given platforms, I had given advice. Over 8 years, you can multiply that by taking into account David Pennick's 1 day kind of retainer. And you multiply £20,000 a day and extend it to 8 years, let's say. How much does it come to? Whatever it comes to, we can work out something like that, like an approximation. Let's see. So if we say that this individual was in contact with me almost, well, every week, not every day, but every week. And let's say that they were in contact with me for, on average, 4 days a week, let's say. So 365 divided by let's say by 4, so it's 91. So 91 days every year. So 91 days. So if we say 91 days multiplied by 8 years, it would be 728 days. And if we say 728 days, £20,000 multiplied by 728, how much would that be? One, 4, 5, 6, 0, 0, 0, 0. That would be 145,060,000. 154,060,000 would be just a fraction, because some of the contracts, some of the work that I had to do was far more intense than just a retainer, comparable to the retainer by the Manchester City Football Club of David Penick. So let's say about 300 million pounds. Would that individual even know the meaning? In addition to their personnel seeking advice and association with me, they also brought cases to me as if I were running an organization funded by the public or anybody else. Cases to do with advocacy about various other people. I didn't ask for a single one to be brought to me. Over the 8 periods, parallel to and simultaneous with the personnel work, they brought to me work that belonged to other people's needs and rights and so on. So it would be like 10 million pounds altogether if we include other things. Does that individual, if they are still breathing, do they realize their criminality and their ingratitude and their stupidity and their outrageous lack of basic common sense and dignity and grace? Where do I begin? It's if my work was not that important, or my time was not that important, or my opinion was not that important, whose time was that important? Is there anyone? There cannot be anyone. Now, in addition to that, their betrayal and the treachery and the possible criminal conspiracy with the likes of the criminals, anti Asian criminals, and thugs. I mean, do these constitute serious racist, race related anti Muslim violations and violence? Now, Private Lie, Ian Pissoff, had no idea what was going on. The most this individual would have contributed to the overall equation of the course over 8 years would not exceed 50,000 pounds at most. So if we take away 50,000 pounds from the 10 million pounds, or the 5 million pounds, or 3 million pounds, whatever millions, it would be still too insignificant to be even mentioned. Does frantic swine at Private Lie have any idea what goes on in society? This is an issue that will be further extended and updated. Now, when the Private Lie has got this rotten boroughs column run by a very feeble and very ignorant individual, they don't really discuss the crimes committed by local councils, and they don't discuss the absolute absence of any legal redress to those who are affected by the criminality and the corruption of the local councils. And there is no record that the Private Lie's Rotten Boroughs column has actually itself secured the prosecution of any single individual criminal in any council in England. This is something that this program, this campaign is actually pointing out, and we shall be extending on this in due course, except to say that this is the, like for example, the so-called award The most complained about award for 2016 to 2022 that the private lie has published in the issue before the current one concerns Birmingham City Council or Birmingham Council, let's say. I'm looking at no record of it in front of me as I'm speaking. Birmingham Council, let's say, and the Lambeth Council, Haringey Council, and the Newham Council. I mean, what does it mean for a local council to be complained about? And the complaints mainly, presumably, refer to the local government's ombudsman. Now, anyone who knows about the local government ombudsman currently would know that local government ombudsman is a criminality in itself. Local government ombudsman is not only a criminality, but it's an outrageous, aggressive, aggravated criminality because it boasts on its website that it's not a regulatory authority, regulatory organization. So, what the fuck is the local government ombudsman about? Why does it publish most complained about list? Because it doesn't constitute any action, which is one of the reasons why, in Newham's case, let's say, for example, Roxana Fias, the executive mayor, feels confident that no matter how corrupt her council regime is, no matter how incompetent she is, no matter how deadly the effects of the negligence of the Newham Council is and are, she doesn't have to be worried about losing any sleep over it. Why? Because for a start, of the elected councillors in Newham, all of them politically are dead. They only come to life when their own allowances and their own kind of petty interests are adversely affected, let's say. For example, when the South African originated Nintendo, or Nando's, no, not Nintendo, Nando's company tried to get a planning permission in Canning Town, and the old Newham Library in Cannington, Barking Road. There was a sudden and unprecedented and never seen again unity among the Labour Party kind of councillors. Those councillors who actually belong to a particular trade union mobilized themselves to oppose that particular Nando's application. That resulted in Roxana Fias actually standing up and actually listening to them and condemning that planning application, which meant that Nando's withdrew their planning application. That was the only occasion. The same councillors, or the same sort of councillors, the same descriptions or descriptions of Newham councillors have then gone to sleep. They went to sleep during the 2022 local council election, where the elected executive mayor post was also up for election. And they allowed Roxana Fias to be elected, and the so called referendum about whether Newham should have the executive mayor post was allowed to be lost. All of that, all of that I connect with the absence of regulatory authority. And the county courts, the high courts, and now the Supreme Court, they're all absolutely corrupt. When it comes to dealing with the council, when it comes to dealing with the council's corruption, when it comes to dealing with the absence of any accountability by a local council or a local executive mayor, the courts are dead. The courts are dead, and the courts are dead because, contrary to the first president of the Supreme Court when it was taken out of the House of Peers and made into a single Supreme Court instead of being called the Judicial Committee of the House of Peers. The first president retired, just about to retire, David Neuberger. Neuberger is a German Jewish origin name. David Neuberger boasted, this criminal prostitute boasted about Brexit, that Brexit would bring all the glories and wonderful business from the rest of the world seeking judicial market in the London courts. Listen to this. This prostitute completely was in denial of the whole of the, well, now 60 million, 50 million, whatever the adult population in the United Kingdom. The adult population in the United Kingdom generally, and the adult electorate in the councils, in specific terms, in context, are being completely denied the existence of. And yet it is the local councils across England that actually represent the closest and the highest number of contacts with individual people and the local councils in their area. And by any definition, more than 80% of those contacts between the councils and the individuals entail, contain corruption, dishonesty, incompetence, lack of care, negligence, stupidity, and downright insult to the people by the local council employed decision makers. But there is no recourse. And there was no recourse even when the so called United Nations envoy on extreme poverty and homelessness, the Australian racist called Philip Alston, based in New York University, but because he is a white racist, he is given extra status by the United Nations racist bureaucracy. So he was appointed United Nations extra special envoy. And as in that capacity, Alston visited the United Kingdom for 10 to 12 days during November 2018. That was 3 months after Roxana Fias became incumbent as mayor in the name of Newham in May 2018. May, June, July, August. 3 or 4 calendar months later. And at the meeting, which was supposed to be gathering evidence about poverty and extreme poverty and homelessness in Newham, this was a gathering that was hosted by an organization, a charity called Community Links. That charity, Community Links, had been and has remained a completely corrupt, opportunistic charity because it didn't take up any of the issues that were raised at the meeting on the 12th of November 2018, nor has it followed up any of it. any of the issues. One of the things that one of the reporters, May Bullman, in the evening in the Independent in the UK, independent.co.uk, reported on the 13th of November 2018, was the description. I shall come to that because I want to be accurate in the quotation. And that is the headline. Mother describes being forced to drink her baby's milk. That's the headline to the online piece, byline to May Bullman, described on that date as social affairs correspondent, Tuesday, the 13th of November 2018, which means that the meeting took place the day before, which was Monday, the 12th of November 2018. So the headline: Mother describes being forced to drink her baby's milk. As people living with poverty come forward to tell UN envoy their stories. And immediately after that, underneath that, there is this quotation from this mother. I was in my slippers. It was so cold. I plucked up the courage to ask them, to say I am hungry. I have a baby. But they said, we can't give you anything. I had to drink my baby's milk to survive. Now, this is a story that May Bullman published. And in the story is a picture by May Bullman of Philip Alston and two of his colleagues, whoever they were, sitting on either side of him, and he's sitting on this at the center on the table. And in front of the table is the image, just about identifiable, of Ruxana Fiaz at the mic. And way down, almost to the last paragraph in May Bullman's piece, is an apology ascribed, attributed to Roxana Fiaz. Let me find Fiaz. Well, there is a piece in the Daily Mail of the same event, on the same event. And the piece in the Daily Mail is, of course, typically racist and prejudiced and ignorant, and is against Philip Alston's visit, which is in line with the narrative that then DWP Secretary of State Amber Rudd actually represented and spoke about in the House of Commons, using the term concept, rejecting Philip Alston's report. But Philip Alston, being a racist, was not only not telling the truth about the councils doing the corruption and the criminality, about the DWP doing the crime and corruption, and forcing people to commit suicide by withdrawing benefits from them. Philip Alston was even more timid than the fucking Guardian. Alston didn't find anything wrong with the councils. Alston collectively, stupidly, and falsely and misleadingly, inaccurately lumped together the UK government. There is no such thing as the UK government if the behavior of the local councils is excluded from the government, which shows the deep, absolute, stupid ignorance on the part of Alston and anyone else who briefed him. So when Fiaz said that she was apologizing on behalf of herself, And on behalf of the council, let's find the actual space, the actual part of the article by May Bullman. That shows the independent being stupid and corrupt and in denial as well. Because the whole description of that meeting by May Bullman takes up the main part of the article. And it doesn't come until about the last paragraph or so of the piece, where they actually managed to allow Roxana Fiaz's apology, staged apology, to appear. Let's see the piece. The last paragraph. It's disgraceful of the Independent. After hearing the witness statements, Newham's mayor, Roxana Fiaz, said, "Can I just apologize on behalf of myself as mayor of Newham and on behalf of the council that you," meaning the person that experienced the deprivation, "experienced that treatment at the hands of people that we employ. It shouldn't have happened." Now, that is not a complete quotation of Fiaz at that event. Another person who attended and who actually wrote her piece by studying others' reports for about 4 days is called Kate Garner. Kate Garner published a piece on a blog dated the 19th of November 2018, in which she added the quotation from Roxana Fia saying that Newham Council needed huge change. Now, neither the huge change that Kate Garner reported nor the treatment at the hands of people that Newham employed, that Roxana Fia said shouldn't have happened. Neither of these has been followed up. This is 6 calendar years since the meeting in 2018, and Roxana Fiaz has not followed up either. Okay. Now, on the 17th of December, on the 17th of December 2022, at a short event lasting less than 2 hours, really, held at the Stratford Library in Newham, I attended the meeting organized by a thing called Newham Voices. And at a moment when Roxana Fiaz had left the meeting, I tried to make a contribution about the Newham Voices. But about 5 or 6 or 7 of these so called supporters verbally objected to me speaking. I mean, they didn't know me. As far as I'm concerned, none of the people who actually spoke, stopping me, knew me except Adrian White, who is listed as the publisher. Now, their objection appeared to me to say that I should not tell the truth about Newham Council. That is what they were doing, and I shall be adding item by item segments and parts of their objection and the evidence that I was prevented from speaking about. And These are the details. Roxana Fiaz should not have been made or treated as the chief guest by the Neom Voices, which she was. Because if Neom Voices represent an independent kind of platform, independent of the Neom Council, then the last person that should have been given the platform as the chief guest would have been anyone from Neom Council, not just Roxana Fiaz, any councillor or any official. Now, in her letter to Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, probably in September 2022, Roxana Fiaz asked for more money, more central government money to be made available to Neom Council because Fiaz claims that the latest census, 2021 census, showed that Neom had more than 50% people, young people, whatever, living in poverty. Now, if that is the case, how is it that the behavior by Neom Council, as meted out to that mother, as recalled and reported in November 2018, should not be made a serious, very important topic which should be examined, and through which examination Neom's state of behavior at present should be focused on. So Neom Voices should be renamed Newham Vices because it was preventing telling the truth about Neom Council's behavior on the most important topics and issues about which Neom should be held to account. Now, the Department for Leveling Up, which is another name now currently for what used to be called the Department Ministry of Housing or Communities Affairs, whatever, was approached by the Guardian, I think, or approached by one of the news outlets to comment on Roxana Fiaz's letter to Rishi Sunak, and they refused to comment or they failed to comment. So overall, Neom Council is refusing to comment. Roxana Fiaz is refusing to comment. Neom Council is refusing to deliver the kind of services that it said it would deliver according to the apology as staged by Roxana Fiaz on the 12th of November 2018. All of these we shall be updating on and expanding on in later editions. This particular broadcast is 1 hour 8 minutes, and we are ending this particular broadcast at 1 hour 8 minutes at 0107 hours GMT on Sunday, the 15th of January 2023.